Hello, everyone, and welcome to Max Amateur's Hour, or the Amateur Hour. Still working on a title here. We'll go ahead and go with Max Amateur's Hour for now. I am Max, and welcome to the show. This is episode 1, and I wanted to start off with setting intentions. So, obviously, in today's society, we are inundated with so much media, whether it be podcasts, YouTube, TV, whatever it may be. What I'm realizing is that putting yourself out there, putting your creations out there only will lead to good things. And my intentions with this podcast is to not only work on my speaking, but also step out of my comfort zone and create something and see what my hard work can turn into. So my goal here is to cultivate and create a community of people who are like-minded as myself, and talk about topics such as self-development, habit change, yoga, minimalism, personal finance, Game of Thrones, basketball, whatever it may be. I really would love for this podcast to be a hybrid where I can just talk about things that I'm very interested in and hopefully attract people who are like myself and enjoy what I'm talking about, and get to a point where I can have guests on the show. We can continue to dive deeper into the topics that I mentioned before, but also get into different type of things. Only time will tell where this podcast will end up going. But as for right now, I would like to again welcome you to Max Amateur's Hour. Now, I don't think that it will be an hour today. Likely I will run out of things to talk about as this is my first podcast. But I did want to get into a little bit of a backstory as to why I'm doing this today. So about a month and a half ago, I was on one of my friend's podcasts, Griffin Fabbitt's. His podcast name is A Podcast Because Nobody Asked For It. He's a really funny guy. I've known him for a long time, a really good guy. I love his family. Shout out to Fabbitt's family. All good people over there. But I was on his show. He allowed me to come on, which I really appreciated. It was something I'd never done before. What I really loved about the podcast itself was the connection that he and I were able to make. He had me on the show. We talked about yoga and meditation, the benefits, my journey with yoga and meditation, why I started, all of that stuff. And we will revisit that here in the podcast, maybe in the next episode or two. But today I kind of wanted to just talk about why I'm starting, and Griffin is a big reason. So after being on his show and talking to him, I really love the connection we were able to make. The conversation we were able to have, more than anything, is what stuck with me. That is a moment in time, and whenever I want to go ahead and go back on it, I can go to his podcast page and listen to our conversation. It's very cool. It's kind of weird to hear yourself for the first time. So when I listen to that podcast, I always think, is that really what I sound like? And so I think that me starting my own podcast and getting out of my comfort zone will allow me to be a little bit more comfortable with who I am, how I sound, and only good things will come from it. So again, my intentions are to have a podcast here, a little bit of a hybrid where we talk about a lot of different things: meditation, minimalism, yoga, self-development, all these things that kind of encompass my life, but also talk about, really fun, more pop culture centered things like Game of Thrones, basketball, a movie, whatever seems to be, really popping and hitting the masses. I'd love to share my thoughts on those as well. So today, I did want to get a little bit into Game of Thrones. After watching the finale last night, I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of things that I want to unpack. I know a lot of people are not very happy with how Season 8 unfolded, and I cannot lie, at first, I was not a fan either. I was not very happy with the writing. I thought a lot of the things that they were doing didn't make all that much sense. It felt rushed. They only gave us 6 episodes when HBO said that they were willing to give them 10. So before I get into any Game of Thrones material, I would recommend that if you have not seen the show and you intend to see the show, stop listening now, because everything moving forward is going to be a ton of spoilers. And if you have not watched the show, you don't care to watch the show, I'll give a little bit of history of what all 8 seasons encompassed. I won't get that long in detail because then I may be sitting here for an hour. There's a lot of stuff. The writing was really good for the first 7 seasons. So essentially, the show starts and we see these different families. We have the Lannisters, the Baratheons, the Starks. Oh, gosh, and I feel like I'm missing a family right now. I probably am. Oh well. Anyway, the family that you begin to follow and start to fall in love with is the Stark family. And there is, without getting into too much detail of the entire family, there is Jon Snow, who is Ned Stark's, who's the head of the Stark family, his bastard. And you'll follow Jon Snow, but you also follow Daenerys Targaryen. That's the other family I was forgetting, the Targaryens. I don't know how that one slipped me. Anyway, the Targaryen girl, Daenerys, has been cast off. She's all alone. She's only has her brother after her father, the Mad King, was dethroned by the Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister, of the Lannister family. So the Lannisters now are in King's Landing. They control the Seven Kingdoms. So what the show is, Game of Thrones, is all about power, and it follows what these different families will do, the politics between everything to get and keep that power. And the Lannister family is very power hungry. They are very focused on their family legacy, their dynasty. They want to keep their family name for centuries. And that's really the motivating factor for a majority of these families, a majority of these houses. And so Daenerys Targaryen, the son of the Mad King who was killed by Jaime, the Kingslayer of the Lannisters family, who now have the throne, the Red Keep. Oh man, I completely lost my train of thought there. I'm so sorry. Anyways, yes, Daenerys, it is her goal to get back to the Iron Throne, to avenge her family, the throne she feels is rightfully hers after her brother dies. Fast forward, we follow Jon's story as well, and he is a bastard who gets sent off to the Night's Watch, and the Night's Watch is a place for bastards and broken men. They are to guard the wall from the White Walkers, and the White Walkers are basically dead zombies, people that are dead that come back to life. They have blue eyes, and they just want to kill you. They want to kill more people, and the Night King is able to rise dead people and add them to his family if the bodies are not burned. So throughout the show, when people die, you burn them so that the Night King cannot create a bigger army of the dead. Anyways, fast forward to season 8. We beat the White Walkers. Everyone is alive. Everything happens really quickly, so the White Walkers are kind of taken care of in one episode, which is an amazing episode. There's a lot of detail. It's a huge battle. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. I don't remember being that nervous since the 2016 finals when LeBron came back and beat the Warriors. What's good? That was very similar to this. I don't know how the living won, but Jon Snow's more or less LeBron James. I guess in this case it would be Arya. For those of you who know everything I'm talking about, I hope you just continue to follow with me here. For those of you that don't know, I'm doing my best with the details, but I don't want to inundate you with too much. So anyway, we have beat the dead. Now the main thing is to figure out who is going to rule the throne. And Jon has pledged his allegiance to Daenerys Targaryen prior to beating the dead because he needed her and her dragons. I did not mention she has 3 dragons or had 3 dragons. She only has one now named Drogon. He's the beast. He's huge. And the dragons are her babies. So she is the mother of dragons. She's very powerful. In order to continue to conquer, she has used all her dragons and burned people alive. Anyone that did not agree with the way she was going about conquering, or anyone that was opposed to her being in power, is dead and died at the hands of dragons and her armies. As she conquered, she continued to increase her army with the Dothraki and the Unsullied. Anyway, we get to the thick of the final episode yesterday, and Jon continues to be pushed over by Dany. He's in love with her, he's in love with her, he's in love with her. And what comes up in season 8 is that Jon's true identity is Aegon Targaryen, meaning that he is Daenerys' nephew, which also means that he has royal blood. He has the right to the throne. He is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. So Daenerys this whole time has believed that she should be queen when in all actuality Jon should be king. A bastard boy who was killed once in the show by the Night's Watch and brought back from the dead basically like Jesus Christ, Jon Snow, was resurrected, comes back, and is more or less the chosen one, the prince that was promised. A prophecy in the show that doesn't end up meaning anything because Arya kills the Night King and Jon basically rallies all the troops. He gives up being king in the north, pledges his allegiance to Dany, and because he needs them in order to beat the dead. They go and try and barter with Cersei, negotiate with her about how they need her army as well in order to beat the dead, which if they had the Golden Company, they had all of Cersei's men, they would have beaten the dead, I think, a lot faster. Anyway, Cersei's a bitch. She only wants what she wants, which is power. So she stays in King's Landing. Now Dany, Jon, and everyone's power or not power, but everyone's energy is focused on getting the throne from Cersei. So they attack King's Landing. Dany gets on her dragons and attacks from the outside and ends up burning the entire city down. So as I mentioned, her dad is the Mad King, so she ends up becoming the Mad Queen. For those of you that watched, I don't really need to explain it. You all saw it. We couldn't believe it. She was freeing slaves, doing all these things, and then in all actuality, she was the main villain. So it gets to the point in the last episode where she is ready to sit on the Iron Throne. She's already addressed her armies and let them know, we've won, but we're going to continue to fight until the world is right. And she believes what she believes is right is her own belief. She thinks she knows how the world should be, and she will continue to conquer. She will continue to conquer, regardless if that means burning down innocent women and children. She is going to continue to acquire more land, more people, until the entire world is hers. And those are her intentions. And in the show, they talk about her fulfilling her destiny with fire and blood, and that's how she gets to where she is now. Anyways, it comes to the point where she has to be stopped, and Jon is the only person who can really do anything about it. He has fought in the Battle of the Bastards and won, took back the North, became king of the North. From being a bastard in the Night's Watch, he was the Lord Commander. They chose him as their leader. He has beat all odds, and I think a lot of people believe that he has beat these odds because of his true identity, Aegon Targaryen. Now, Jon was obviously raised by Ned Stark, who's an honorable man. The Starks are honorable. They stay. What they say they're going to do, they will do. They're not very political people. They are righteous. They are easy to root for. They are who ultimately the show ends up being about. So going back to the ending, we know that Jon stabs Dany. He kills her. And it's because he has to. Jon is willing to kill the love of his life to save everyone in the planet, when a majority of the characters in this show are willing to kill everyone in the planet in order to get what they love, which is power. And we see that with Dany. So when Jon does this, I think what the writers are trying to convey is that he is still the ultimate hero. The show is called Game of Thrones, and it's not A Song of Fire and Ice, which is the name of the books the show is based on. A Song of Fire and Ice talks about, it basically follows Jon Snow in his life, and it's called A Song of Fire and Ice because he is, to the world, they know him as Jon Snow. Raised by the Starks. He's a wolf. He is born in the cold. He is the snow. He's from the north. His last name is Snow. But his true identity is Aegon Targaryen, which means he is full of fire and blood, like Dany, like his father, Rhaegal Targaryen. So what is he really? I think that Jon doing what was right by killing Dany so the world had no more pain, so they could break the wheel of the Iron Throne, shows that he is the ultimate hero. He was willing, again, to sacrifice his love for everyone in the world, and ends up being casted out back to the Night's Watch, the place for broken men and bastards. Now, this was the rightful king, Aegon Targaryen, who is sent to exile and live at the ends of the north, at the wall, to protect the realm of no White Walkers. There are no White Walkers. There's nothing to protect. So they're basically sending Jon away because the Unsullied who captured Jon and the Unsullied followed Daenerys did not want him alive. So he sacrifices himself, but it's for the better of the game. So ultimately, the Starks win the Game of Thrones. I think that a lot of people, myself included, got so invested in the characters, and selfishly, we want the rightful king, Jon, because we have that information. We know he should be on the throne, Aegon Targaryen, and he would be a great ruler, as we've seen it, as he was Lord Commander. He always does what's right, and as the king in the north, he always does what's right. He is willing to sacrifice his own power to save the rest of the world from the dead. Jon Snow is the ultimate hero. He is the guy that every guy would fight for because he's honorable. He leads the correct way. He's the consummate professional, like that of Derek Jeter or LeBron James. That's who Jon Snow is in this story. He's the chosen one. And for him not to end up on the throne, I think it hurts a lot of people, myself included. But when you really frame what has happened in him sacrificing everything that he could ever want, have, and should have for the betterment of the world. And when he does this, he allows for the North to be liberated by Sansa. Arya is able to be free and travel west, figure out what is west of Westeros, and create her own journey. And Bran, which still I don't understand why Bran is the ultimate king. I mean, he's the three-eyed raven, so I guess he knows, he saw all of this happening, and he knew Jon would do what he was going to do in order for the better of the world. Which, I mean, if Bran can see the future, he obviously knows what's going to be right or can change what needs to be right for people moving forward. So I'm not all that upset that Bran is the king of the Six Kingdoms now, since the North is or has been liberated. But Jon never wanted the power to begin with. So us, the audience who have fallen in love with him and his character, he never wanted to be king. So us, selfishly, we wanted him there because we knew he'd be such a great leader. I mean, I just said that. But I think he ultimately gets what he wanted. When he, in episode 4, I believe, I could be wrong, says bye to Tormund and doesn't pet Ghost, it's because he knows this is where my fate will lie. This may be the possibility I may end up having to live north of the wall and become a wildling. And more or less now he is king of the free folk. He is the new Mance Rayder. All those people that he was walking out with in the final scenes of Game of Thrones were wildlings, and they were heading into the woods to live free with no politics, with none of the power-hungry people in Westeros. So I think ultimately Jon goes back to one of his closest friends in Tormund, his direwolf Ghost, who has been by his side, protected him, and always been there for him, and is going to live this life now that he wanted, that he told Ygritte he would love. You know, Ygritte was his first love in the show, and he was very happy with her. He did well as a wildling. And I think it was just very symbolic that when they were escorting him out of Westeros, his hair was down, just like it was when he was a wildling. He didn't have to pull it back anymore because he wasn't this proper person that everybody looked up to anymore. Rather, he was exiled and on to his own journey. It's a lot to digest, and I don't know that everyone will agree with my thoughts, but I wanted to go ahead, collect them, and share them here. I mean, I think a lot of it, the ending of the show really underlines that Jon Snow was always a Stark. He was always Jon Snow. He was never Aegon Targaryen. When he tells Tyrion that we are not bound by our blood, he means that. He knows that he really is not a Targaryen. He is more Stark than anything. He is and was raised by Ned Stark. Obviously he's not Ned Stark's bastard, but everything he knows and everything he does is because of how Ned raised him. So I think that reinforces his true identity as Jon Snow and not Aegon Targaryen. And again, we have to remember the show's title is Game of Thrones, and the Starks win, which I think we ultimately should be happy about, because that is the house that is the most honorable of all. They at least from what we've seen, have not been power hungry, have not backstab people to the extent that the Lannisters have, the Targaryens have, what have you. So I mean, all in all, season 1 through season 7 were amazing. Season 8 was a bit of a letdown, but the ending could have been much worse. The White Walkers could have won. Cersei could have stayed on the Iron Throne. But in this scenario, we get our favorite characters, Sansa becoming a queen, who she will lead the North very well. Bran, who's a three-eyed raven, the guy has superpowers, is going to be leading Westeros now, which is a good thing. Arya is able to go on, handle her own, lead her own ship, find new things. And obviously we know Arya is a badass. She killed the White Walker. I don't think she's going to need any help. And Jon Snow, the true king, is the king of the free folk, which I think is ultimately what he wanted, to simply be free and be away from all of the nonsense in Westeros. Finally, he can rest. He no longer has to fight for causes that he does not believe in. So those are my thoughts on the endings of Game of Thrones. I know it was very Jon Snow focused, but I just think that the books ultimately are written about him. He is the chosen one. And in this scenario, I still think he is the chosen one. He makes the ultimate sacrifice for the better of Westeros, for the better of his family. And that's that. I mean, I think it is a wrap. It's something that I will continue to look into and get details about, because the show is so good. There's so much time spent into it. The writing was great for 7 seasons, and I think that a lot of the disappointment this season was how invested a majority of the masses became in Daenerys, became in Jon, became in Arya, or the investment in Sansa. All these characters we are invested in individually, forgetting that the show is about these houses. It is about the Game of Thrones. So with that, I want to go ahead and sign off for today's episode. I was able to talk a lot longer than I thought I was going to be able to, so please let me know what you think about my thoughts on the ending of Game of Thrones. What are your thoughts? Please let me know. If you took the time to listen to this all the way through, I really do appreciate you. I hope to not really see you, but I hope to be able to speak to you through this microphone next week. Well, that's all for the show. I really appreciate it, and namaste, man. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. May you all be well.